The US government just eliminated the $7.500 EV subsidy. Prices went up, not down, and somehow 72 PHNTRM of new EV buyers just traded in their gasoline car anyway. That number was 67 PHNTRM in January. It's now April, 3 months. No subsidies, no financial incentives. Just people walking into dealerships and making a decision something changed. And if you own a gasoline car right now, you need to understand what that something is. Let's start with the raw data, because the shift happening at dealerships right now is hard to ignore. According to Edmunds, one of the most trusted automotive market research firms in the United States, the percentage of new EV buyers who traded in a gasoline vehicle reached 67.1 PHNTRM in January. By April, that number had jumped to 72.1 PHNTRM. That's a 5 percentage point swing in just 3 months. In a market this large, that kind of movement doesn't happen by accident. But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just first-time EV buyers making the switch. The loyalty data, meaning people who already own an electric vehicle and chose to buy another one, also surged. In January, around 26.2 PHNTRM of EV owners traded their old electric vehicle in for a new one. By April, that figure had climbed to 35.4 PHNTRM. Think about what that actually means. It means people who have already lived with an electric vehicle, who know its limitations, who've dealt with charging infrastructure, range anxiety, software quirks, and they're still choosing to stay in the EV ecosystem. That's not a marketing campaign. That's real world conviction built through daily experience. Here's where the story gets complicated and more compelling. This surge in EV adoption is happening at the same time as two major financial headwinds. First, the U.S. federal government has eliminated the $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles that had been a cornerstone of EV affordability for years. Second, many individual states have pulled back or eliminated their own local EV incentives. The financial floor that once cushioned the price difference between gas and electric has been pulled out. And yet demand is going up, not down. At the same time, the broader used car market is experiencing significant inflation. According to Cox Automotive's Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index, used car prices are currently running about 4 PHNTRM higher than the same period in 2025. That's already painful for average consumers. But electric vehicles are outpacing even that. According to Jeremy Robb, chief economist at Cox Automotive, used EVs, specifically 3-year-old electric vehicles, have seen their prices outpace comparable gasoline vehicles for 6 consecutive weeks. By April, they were sitting at 11 PHNTRM higher than at the start of the year. 11%. In 4 months. The conventional wisdom said that, without subsidies, EV demand would stall. The market is currently writing a very different story. So what's actually driving this? What changed between January and April to accelerate a trend that even eliminated subsidies couldn't slow down? The answer, according to Ivan Drury, head of analysis at Edmunds, points directly to fuel prices, and more specifically, to the conflict in the Middle East that has sent gasoline costs surging in recent months. This is a dynamic the automotive industry has seen before, but never quite like this. In previous oil price spikes 2008, 2011, 2022, consumers responded by gravitating toward smaller, more fuel-efficient gasoline cars. Hybrids gained share. Big SUVs lost it. But the electric vehicle market wasn't mature enough at those moments to absorb mass consumer interest. Now it is. The charging infrastructure, while still imperfect, is vastly more developed than 5 years ago. The vehicle lineup, from affordable mass market EVs to luxury options, is deeper than ever. And critically, the total cost of ownership calculation has shifted dramatically in EVs' favor when gas prices are elevated. When gasoline costs $4.50 per gallon, the math on an electric vehicle starts looking very different. The higher upfront cost, which buyers previously rejected, suddenly becomes an investment with a visible payback timeline. That psychological shift is powerful, and it's happening in real time at dealership trade in desks across the country. But Drury also issued a warning that shouldn't be dismissed. It is too early to declare this a permanent structural shift. The speed of this change is tightly linked to geopolitical instability. If Middle East tensions ease and fuel prices normalize, some of this momentum could fade just as quickly as it appeared. Inside these broad market trends, there are sharper, more specific stories playing out, and they reveal just how dramatically consumer behavior is shifting. Depending on vehicle type, the biggest loser in the current market used gasoline SUVs and crossovers. According to Cox Automotive data, this segment has seen value appreciation of just 0.3 PHNTRM, compared to 2025, the lowest performance of any segment in the entire market. For a vehicle category that dominated American roads for the last decade, that number represents a serious warning signal. The reason is straightforward. These are the vehicles with the highest fuel consumption, and in an environment of elevated gas prices, that operational cost is being priced into residual values in real time. Buyers looking at a used gasoline SUV aren't just calculating the purchase price, they're calculating what it's going to cost them to run that vehicle for the next 3 years. And that calculation is becoming increasingly unfavorable. On the flip side, the small car segment, which represents fuel-efficient, lower-consumption gasoline vehicles, recorded the second highest price appreciation in the entire market at 7.6 PHNTRM. Consumers are making rational trade-offs. When fuel is expensive, vehicles that minimize fuel consumption hold their value. That's true whether the powertrain is electric or a small, efficient gasoline engine. This divergence within the gasoline segment itself is significant. It tells us that consumers aren't just anti-gasoline, they're anti-inefficiency. The vehicles being punished are the ones that consume the most. The vehicles being rewarded are the ones that consume the least. Electric vehicles, sitting at the extreme end of that efficiency spectrum, are currently the biggest beneficiary of that logic. So where does this leave us? The data is real. The momentum is measurable, and the underlying logic, that rising fuel costs accelerate the economic case for electrification, is sound. What happened between January and April 2025 isn't noise, it's a signal. But the honest answer is that we don't yet know if this is a structural turning point, or a temporary defensive reaction to a specific set of geopolitical and economic conditions. The experts who study this market most closely at Edmunds, at Cox Automotive, are not ready to call it permanent. And that intellectual honesty matters. What we can say is this. The old argument that consumers only adopt EVs when they're heavily subsidized is no longer holding up. People are switching to electric vehicles, even as those subsidies disappear. Even as EV prices rise faster than gasoline car prices, and even as the broader economic environment grows more uncertain. That's a meaningful shift in consumer psychology, one that took years of infrastructure build-out, vehicle development, and lived EV experience to create. Whether this summer's gasoline prices hold, whether Middle East tensions escalate or resolve, whether EV prices stabilize or keep climbing, all of that will determine whether April 2025 becomes a footnote or a landmark in automotive history. But right now the direction of travel is clear, and more Americans are choosing electric, not because they're told to, but because the numbers finally make sense.